Our second reading for this morning is from Mark chapter 4, verses 26 through 34. Jesus said to the crowd, "The reign of God is like this. A sower scatters seed on the ground and then goes to bed at night and gets up day after day. Through it all, the seed sprouts and grows without the sower knowing how it happens. The soil produces a crop by itself, first the blade, then the ear, and finally the ripe wheat in the ear. When the crop is ready, the sower wields the sickle, for the time is ripe for harvest." Jesus went on to say, "What comparison can we use for the reign of God? What image will help to present it? It is like a mustard seed, which people plant in the soil. It is the smallest of all the earth's seeds. Yet once it is sown, it springs up to become the largest of shrubs, with branches big enough for the birds of the sky to build nests in its shade." Using many parables like these, Jesus spoke the message to them, as much as they could understand. Everything was spoken in parables, but Jesus explained everything to the disciples later when they were alone.
My grandfather built me a tree house. Well, it wasn't so much a house, but a few planks of board in a tree. But it was mine. But as my sister grew older, it became our tree house. At first, I was not quite happy about that, but with time, we both come to love this tree house. As a youngster, it seemed so high. But as I grew older, it wasn't really all that high. But the strange thing about this tree house, it was built into a crepe myrtle, which is a southern tree. It has delicate flesh that you can almost take your fingernail and scrape across it, and you can see the green of the limb or the branch or the trunk. It's also really not a tree to build a tree house, because it doesn't really have one clear defined trunk. It's more as one seedling grows, they sort of grow together, and it's sort of this mangled beauty of a tree. And the best thing is, during the summer, in the hot, humid months of North Carolina, they bloom. Beautiful pink, crimson, red, purplish blooms. So it was almost having a tree house in a florist, if you will. Now, instead of this tree house being built among the branches, it was more or less wedged in between the trunks, with a few supporting pieces to hold the tree house and the few 2 or 3 wide planks that made the tree house. And how we loved it. I remember still when I became brave enough, and my sister with me, who's 4.5 years younger, we both braved at the same time that we could jump from this tree house to the ground. Remember, my grandfather built it without a ladder, so it was not all that high. But it is a place where we would gather, friends would gather, and it's the tree house we loved. But as I grew older and my friends grew older, we sought out other trees, and we'd build similar trees up in more suitable trees, and higher we would go in hopes my sister would not climb that high. But she did. But over the years, when we passed by the property in North Carolina, I noticed that those tree houses high in the sky have basically fallen from the tree or hanging by perhaps one mere nail. But even though the boards may not be as trusty, for some reason that crepe myrtle treehouse is still there. The most unlikely place to build a treehouse, and the most unlikely flesh to hold one. When I mentioned you could scrape with your fingernail, this tree suffered much more than that. We would take a nail and scratch our initials in its side. We would write messages. We would draw. And somehow, that tree still lives. Unlikely places where growth can happen and hold such simple but beautiful memories. The sower went out to sow and scattered seeds. It's like having a mustard seed and planting it. That will grow to be the biggest tree of all we hear. This is where I imagine a crepe myrtle. Because mustard seeds don't usually produce huge trees, but shrubs, beautiful yellow flowers, and of course, eventually, the savory taste of mustard. Some like yellow, some like more bold, but something out of the most unexpected thing. But it is those limbs, those branches that hold it all up. For shade, for humans on the ground, for shade for the birds, for the beauty of memories itself. Yet sometimes, when the smallest of seeds bloom, from our gardens for food, from the beauty of flowers, but when we are seeking food and we plant and we say, whoops, a mistake, the fruit has gone to seed. It's too big of seeds. And if we're not seeking seeds, we yank it out. We'll learn better next time. Sometimes when we say something has gone to seed, it's almost as if we imagine a person that has gone wayward, a seedy place that's unsavory. But, my friends, the simplest of seeds become a beautiful flower at first. It's this nativity, a thing of beauty, a fragrant variety. Flowers, too, are food for our souls. And those seeds fashion the future. We become utterly dependent upon them. In 1962, a group gathered and formed Mountain Rise United Church of Christ in a house. From a house church, we are where we are today. Those seeds that are planted and were planted, they still harvest among us. But with time, we've added more seeds to the variety. You are not that same church. We have those splendid roots and that trunk, but the things that have come to flower has brought more diversity, more unity, more discovery. Who could imagine the 1960s would also produce 2024? What changes have come to life? I never imagined as a kid when I was watching reruns of the Jetsons that the Jetsons would almost become reality. I remember thinking, how novel you could talk to someone on the telephone and see their face. We all FaceTime. Or our cars giving us directions to avoid those space traffic jams, if you will, or for us, those traffic jams along 590, 390, 490, 90, or wherever we're going, when the traffic backs up and we're like, please, another route. But there have been times in my life when the voice comes from the car and says, your trip has been delayed and you're still on the fastest route. Have you had that experience? Well, there are certain roads that one can travel, the Boston Turnpike, and to Rhode Island, there are not many other ways but to keep going. But the thing is, sometimes we must slow down. Sometimes we must take the care to plant the seed, to water the seed, and bring it to birth. Because the seeds that we want to plant, those seeds of justice and peace and welcome, affirmation, accessibility, are seeds that haven't come easy for civilization. For sometimes the more privileged we are, sometimes the less we see, it has been said. But when we can create churches and communities where one can roll in just as easy as running in, a seed has come to bloom. In a world where mental illness is not considered a doom for one, there are medications for depression, bipolar, and folks live healthy lives. When we plant seeds, we have to learn how to cultivate them. When we plant the seeds and they grow into those trees of branches big enough, there will be room for all of us. Not just here, but all of us, God's creation, God's people, all created in that great image. My friends, the realm of God is like a mustard seed. When it is sown in the earth, it is transformed and grows strong enough to offer shelter to the birds, swings for children to swing from, places to rest in the shade, to prepare to do even harder work of justice that needs to be done. And also, when we plant ourselves, may we too be transformed by God's love and become a strong enough presence to shelter all God's people. Amen.